Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here. Now over the years I've been asked some questions literally thousands of times about Final Fantasy XIV. Among the most frequent is the tried and true MMO question, is it too late to start playing? Sometimes it's also just a simple, is it worth? And quite frankly, either way, they're some of the toughest questions to answer. I mean, come on, you're gonna ask me. I made thousands of YouTube videos, I play the game every day, of course I'm gonna tell you it's worth it. So instead of giving you another biased opinion that demands that you follow suit and play the critically acclaimed MMORPG Final Fantasy XIV with a free trial that covers up to level 60 including the Heavensward expansion, I'm going to present you with the essentials and the variety of content so you can just understand what you're taking on and make the decision yourself. So first and foremost, Final Fantasy XIV is an MMO that is built for JRPG enthusiasts. From level 1 it seeks to guide you through its world and its lore with an immersive and constantly evolving story. If you ask me, whether or not you enjoy huge immersive JRPG stories is one of the most important questions to ask before you decide whether or not it's worth for you to start playing. The story isn't just present, it's omnipresent. You literally must progress through every story quest sequentially through every expansion. This unlocks major features, dungeons, raids, bosses, side content, story, dailies, weeklies. Literally everything is interconnected with the main scenario. Now I know that seems pretty daunting. It's like taking on a new Netflix series and being told you really should watch everything from season 1. And we're talking about hundreds of hours on this story alone. And that's why it's so important, because the story is a major portion of content in the overall game. It wants you to be excited that you have hundreds of hours with these characters, learning and understanding the world, crying in both joy and anger. It doesn't want you to want to rush to endgame and then fall into some sort of endgame rut. But just because the game wants that from you, I mean, it doesn't have to be what you want. You could skip through the story quests and just rush to endgame. But let me tell you, you're skipping a lot. The endgame will treadmill on, releasing new bosses and raids and gear, the usual stuff. When you catch up to it, you'll get into whatever the new hotness is, but the story, it's always there for you to enjoy, and it really is the backbone of the game. Now, it does start off pretty slow, even after the early game was revamped, and if you want to learn more about that, check out my A Realm Reborn Revamped and Restarted series. But if you're into that sort of thing, you'll basically be getting a massive JRPG story on top of the MMO. I mean, not to mention the music. I mean, you're going to go through the story, and you're going to hear all sorts of tracks. You'll get everything from atmospheric zone music to metal boss music, to whimsical fairy tunes, to giant orchestral pieces, seriously, the music is a rabbit hole all its own. Or you can mute it and turn on your favorite Spotify soundtrack, do you, but trust me, you might get sucked into the music here. So the story's huge, but the game still has the usual MMO flavors, even if at a lot of times it's going to feel like a single-player RPG. You can start the game as one of 8 classes, with a 9th unlocking pretty shortly into the game over in Limsa Lominsa. These branch into 10 different jobs, all with distinct party roles within the holy trinity of tank, healer, and DPS. As you level up, you'll gain access to 7 more jobs, totaling 17, with 2 more on the way in the Endwalker expansion. There's even a bonus limited job that offers its own minigames and challenges on the side. Now, with so many choices, people of course are going to ask, which job is best, any jobs they should avoid, what's the flavor of the month right now. But honestly, it really is all down to player preference and performance. Every job is played and is valuable in endgame content so long as the player is practiced, and you'll rarely see something like a segregation of job choice be a relevant factor. That does mean that maybe the jobs aren't as varied as they could be, because they try to make sure they're all useful in all content. So you may find that you have to go through a few choices to really find the one that sings to you. But as long as you pick the job, that you think looks coolest, you can do any content in the game. No questions asked. And also, if you don't like your first choice, you can level every job on a single character. You can also hop with that character to other servers, and eventually we're going to be able to go to any other data center that we want. So it's also not very alt-centric of a game, you just do everything on one character. On top of that, there's 8 crafting classes and 3 gathering classes. I'm not super big into a lot of this content, but they are fully fledged classes with abilities and rotations to achieve better results. Some players do get lost entirely in this aspect of the game, only resorting to combat when required, like with the main story. You can also level all of these on one character as well, so you can basically be self-sufficient in every way possible. Though your inventory space is probably going to hurt if you're not careful. So with all that, what about content? You're going to get the flavor that you usually expect out of an MMO, starting with dungeons. Dungeons will be introduced around the level 15 main story, and they see 4 players run through a bunch of baddies and bosses. They're very linear and are designed to be completed by any casual player without a lot of time invested. You'll use these for leveling and earning endgame currencies primarily, but they're rarely ever going to pose a challenge, unless you do something very particular to make it give you a challenge. I don't even know what. Then comes Trials, which will start off as 4-man instances when they're first introduced to you in the game, but they eventually evolve entirely into 8-man boss encounters with no trash whatsoever. These vary from being averagely challenging main scenario missions, some of which you'll roll over, some of which, might get you a time or two, to the more difficult extreme trial battles, which are farmed for mounts, weapons, and a few other items in the endgame, or you can go back and farm some old ones for some old rewards. These are among the bread and butter of major updates, with new normal and extreme ones basically being added every patch. They are considered entry-level endgame bosses on extreme at max level, and will be the first major stepping stone into more serious content. These also appear in both main story and side story content with cutscenes and lore. Again, the story is just going to be present everywhere you go. There are also Unreal Trials, but that's going to require a lot more direct explanation, so just know there is a different difficulty, but it's not any more difficult than Extreme, that just the gear is limited. It's a whole other thing. We got videos on that. Then there are raids. Now these are plentiful and come in all sorts of difficulty and sizes. The 24-man raids are considered casual content, though these bosses can definitely still pack a punch for the average player if you're not careful. A lot of times on week 1, you'll see a few wipes to these here and there. These heavily expand the world, and in some cases are actually mandatory to continue the main scenario or unlock other major side content. They come with armor upgrades, minions, crafting items, and other collectibles that you can just pick up. They're also structured a lot more like a traditional raid, with trashes and bosses, something that you might be more accustomed to if you've played other MMORPGs. Then there's 8-man raids. These are actually pretty much identical to Trials nowadays, where you're placed in front of a boss, and when you defeat the boss, you leave the instance and then go to the next raid boss. Now on top of that, 8 is the primary raid size in this game for more difficult content, including those extreme trials we mentioned earlier. While they often follow themes from the main scenario, 8-man raids in particular are mostly involved in side quests and are not required to continue the game's main plot. The normal mode raids are a casual method of enjoying the story for these side contents, while still working on some small gear upgrades week after week. They're about as difficult as the 24-man bosses, some of them a little less so, but they're not overall that challenging. Then these same bosses are remixed into the Savage difficulty. This is the game's primary raid scene once you've warmed up to extremes and gotten your feet wet. Each raid tier consists of 4 bosses, though the final boss normally has either a major bonus phase or sometimes a bonus boss altogether. These encounters are very exacting, often requiring all 8 players to perform mechanics in a near-perfect dance, lest they risk gradual or immediate execution. If you want to beat these, you'll definitely have to put in some practice, though there is a healthy scene of random players and pre-made groups called statics to tackle these types of encounters. Then we hit the big mama of ultimate encounters. These are the pinnacle of the game's difficulty, with 16+ minute long tests of endurance, boss mechanics, and survival. They are themed off of old storylines from raids and main story quests, remixed together with multiple bosses in a new way with new mechanics. You'll need to achieve a much higher level of job and game mastery to take this content on, and don't be surprised if it takes you a very long time to overcome these encounters, especially when they're brand new. Now, a lot of the easier content we just mentioned actually has roulettes that you can enter to earn tons of bonus EXP and currencies by basically being assigned a random one to do every day. It's a pretty nice way of leveling, especially off of things like the old 24-man raids or a dungeon that you just haven't seen in a while. Now, there are other varieties of party content as well. Deep Dungeons offer a roguelite type experience that ranges from leveling with random players to delving into dangerous depths where one false move sends you back several hours. Players even solo these for incredible challenges and bragging rights, and trust me, it is going to be a time if you decide to take that on. Then there's exploration content. Eureka is a zone with its own separate leveling and stat systems, and even bonus actions that you can't use anywhere else. It's designed to be more like old school MMO grinds, though that's largely been diminished over the years. Spawning bosses under specific conditions by killing certain monsters under certain weather. You can guard and escort NPCs to discover various treasures, and there's even a giant 56-player raid at the end of it all, largely inspired by Final Fantasy XI. Following that is the Save the Queen, a series with similar exploration and raid options remixed with more new game systems. The Southern Bajin Front allows players to level their jobs from 71 to 80 with relative ease, while tackling a 48-player raid occasionally for even more rewards. It has ranks that give you access to new areas and even bonus actions similar to Eureka that help immensely against the deadly foes that lurk around. Especially the 1v1 boss duels that you can be thrown into, one of my favorite things about that type of content. There's also a follow-up zone to this called Zadnor, which is pretty much identical in every way, but with updated encounters, duels, and a raid inside called the Dalriada. Now, smack dab in between the Southern Front and Zadnor is the Lubrum Reginae, a unique beast in terms of content. On normal mode, it's a standard 24-man that does utilize the unique actions from Save the Queen content to make you an absolute powerhouse. Or nobody can use them and it can take way longer than it's supposed to, but somewhere in between there. However, it also has a 24 to 48-man Savage version with additional bosses, mechanics, and even the threat of permadeath. That's right, you wipe in here, you start the whole thing over again. Now, one downside to all the things I've been telling you about is they all take place separate from the overworld. In Final Fantasy XIV, the world zones are largely vessels to just complete the main scenario, that afterwards are then revisited for side quests, dailies, gathering, and any of the open world fates that you see around, which are just world events that people can level off of and earn occasional cosmetic rewards. There are things called hunts, which in the overworld, entire communities come together to spawn and take on. Some of them just spawn on a timer, but some have some ridiculous spawn requirements. Some want you to wait until the right weather conditions, while another one literally asks you to jump off a cliff and kill yourself, over and over again. They get pretty creative with these. Now that covers a lot of combat content. Final Fantasy XIV, however, takes the term theme park to another level when it comes to MMOs, with an actual theme park. The Gold Saucer hosts all sorts of minigames from frequent events like platforming challenges and just dodging some boss AoEs that are very difficultly displayed, to a rail shooter and a full-on racing game. There's even a fully fledged RTS and a card game with over 300 collectible cards that you'll earn from all corners of the game's content, including much of what we've already discussed. This kind of stuff is far from mandatory, but it's addictive to those of us who might be a little too addicted to collecting things. Now, there is also PvP, but I feel bad talking about it. I do find it pretty fun, but I'll say that most of us feel like it needs a lot more love, both in and out of its competitive scene. Now, they are overhauling it a lot in Endwalker, but right now I'll say if PvP is your main drive, maybe do some research and see what high-end matches look like to get a better idea of its various systems, but it's gonna be pretty lacking until they update it to the new system. It even has its own separate skills and hotbars from PvE, so PvE and PvP balance never get mixed up. But still, I feel like I can't talk about it enough in this video in an intelligent enough manner, so just know that it is there. There are a bunch of different game modes, most of them large scale. We're going to be getting some smaller scale ones soon. Reward structure needs work. We know it's getting some work. Basically, TLDR, please look forward to it. Now, I can go on about the various other tidbits of the game. Housing's a big one, very contentious, but there are apartments if you don't care too much about that. There's tons of daily and weekly quests, which advance their own individual stories. Gathering instances like ocean fishing and Diadem. Unreal difficulty trials, we mentioned those before. Blue Mage, the limited job we mentioned before. There's even a performance feature, which legit gives you instruments to play your own music, and people do some really good stuff with that. There's the glamour system to customize your cosmetics. There's achievements, mounts, cosmetic minions, parasols, seasonal events, collaborations with Monster Hunter and Nier. The list goes on. I honestly describe Final Fantasy XIV as a shallow ocean of content. It covers a lot of ground, but most pieces of content are barely knee-deep. There's the occasional deep end, but you really gotta go looking for them, and not everyone is gonna stumble into them. I feel enjoyment of the game hinges a lot on having an open mind and trying to participate in a lot of different activities instead of just kind of narrowing in on one. But, no one can make you like something you don't like, so this is really where it comes down to it. Did you like the story? Do you like JRPG stories? Do you like raids? And then do you like all the other stuff? It's really just a matter of finding what are your key interests and then sticking to them. And honestly, the game's producer and director has straight up said, if there's stuff you don't like, then unsubscribe, and when there's more stuff you do like, come back and try it again. He's honest, and, a lot of us appreciate that. Besides, I think we all know at this point that burning out on a game and never wanting to play it again is a lot worse than stepping away from a game and deciding to come back to it at a time that's opportune for you. So I guess for the is it too late to start question, no, it's never too late. The longer you wait, the more story you'll have to do, and that ranges from either being a promise of countless hours of content to a giant wall to get to endgame, and that's, again, going to depend on the individual. But you'll never technically be behind on anything but the story. At max level, catching up is a matter of anywhere from 10 minutes to, maybe a week of effort, depending on how much gil you have to spend on crafted items. As for the is it worth it variant of that question, did any of what I just said sound fun? If not, then at best, maybe a friend or two will convince you, but at worst, then it's not for you. And that's fine. There's so many MMOs and games on the market that you determining whether or not something sounds fun to you is going to be a major factor to whether or not you participate. Again, I'm not going to tell you you have to play it. I could tell you could try the free trial. I could tell you all these things about it, and none of that could interest you. And that's fine. Don't let someone make you feel bad for not wanting to play it or not wanting to try it. That's honestly the truth. Now, if you want to learn more about any of the things I've been talking about, subscribe to the channel. I have videos on pretty much everything from podcasts about the story and lore to really anything in the game, to guides on leveling methods to videos of high-end raids. If you have any questions, throw them in the comment section of the video and maybe someone can help answer them, or you can follow my live stream and come by and ask there. And most important, just make sure to have fun, and good luck. So with that, that's going to be a wrap for my video. Thank you for watching. Be sure to head to the comment section below, and I'll see you in the next one. Until then, take care.